right, awesome. We will go ahead and get started. So hello everyone and welcome to this week's Alertus Power Lunch, User Management and Alertus Console Customization. My name is Sarah and I'm a training specialist here at Alertus and I'll be leading the session today. I am also joined by Brooke, who unfortunately lost her voice, so I'll be doing the talking today, but Brooke is still here to put some resources in the chat, and she'll be able to answer some questions in the chat as well if you all have any questions. As always, feel free to leave them in the Q&A box or the chat. But this session, we will walk you through the process of updating user roles and assigning restrictions, allowing you to tailor each individual's permissions in the Alertus console to fit their unique needs. And plus, we'll also briefly dive into how to modify the Alertus console settings to apply system-wide changes that enhance your organization's alerting capabilities. And as always, this is an interactive session, so please feel free to put your questions into the chat or the Q&A box. And this session is also being recorded for training purposes, and everyone that registered will get a recording of the session sent out to them after the session today. But without further introduction, we will go ahead and get started. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can take a look at the Alertus console together. And I'm just logging in as an admin, so I do have the permissions to update users and access, which we'll walk through. And this account does also have permission to update the system-wide settings that we'll take a look at as well. But to get started, I want to briefly take a look at a few Alertus console settings that you could update for system-wide changes. You can access the settings page for your system either by clicking on the settings button at the bottom left here, or you can also open up the configure system section and click on the settings page here. Either way you get there, it'll take you to the same page where again you are able to apply some system-wide settings for all of the users that are logging into your console. So for example, there are some default values that you can set up top here. If you did want to set, say, a default duration for all of your alerts that you could still edit as you're sending them out. You can also set a default priority value or a default alert profile or delivery methods to use for your alerts as well. But I did want to focus on this enable/disable features section today. This is where you can enable or disable some pages and features in the console that again would apply to all users that are logging in. So for example, right now I do have all 4 activation pages showing: rapid, preset, custom, and desktop. But let's say, for example, I am an organization that does not leverage Alertus desktop software at all. I might not really have a need for the desktop activation page. Or I might also be an organization that has a bunch of campuses that are spread out throughout the country, and I might not really ever have a reason to use the rapid activation page that would send an alert out to all of the devices on my system. So if I did want to turn off some of those, I can just uncheck them here. I can remove desktop activation, I can uncheck rapid activation, and then I can come down and click save, and that will update those settings. So I've removed those activation pages from being visible for everyone that's logging in and using the Alertus console. And if you change your mind or you add desktops in the future and you want to bring them back, you can of course always do that by going back to the settings page, and then you can just check them to re-enable them. This show priority options that I'm checking is just what gives people the option to change the priority value for the alert on that page as they're sending it out. And I'll turn on rapid activation as well. So now if I click save, I'll see them coming back so people can go there and send alerts out if you'd like. But there are certain situations where you might not just want to update settings for everyone. You might want to restrict access for specific users. So in that scenario, if you want to limit what individual users can see when they log in, you'll make those changes under the Configure System section here from the Users and Access Rights page right here. So this is where you can go, again, if you do need to add new users to log into the Alertus console, or if you need to update the settings for a specific user. So just to show an example, I am going to add a new user here, and I'm just going to click Add User, and it'll bring me to this page where I can fill out their information. And I'm just going to create an account for myself. So I'll give myself a username. This enabled toggle just means that my account is turned on and able to be used and logged into. I can also assign a restriction, or I'm sorry, a role to each of my users, and this role will just determine what pages they have access to when they log into the console, and we'll walk through how to create and customize these roles, but for now, I'm going to give myself full admin access to everything. And then optionally, you can assign restrictions to your users if you'd like to further restrict what they'll have access to. We'll get into restrictions later as well, but for now, I'm not going to assign any restriction to this user. And then I'll be able to put in the email address for that user, as well as any specific notes that I might want to attach to their account. And then you have the option to either send an invitation email for that user to create their own password, or you can also just manually create a password for the user. Since I'm creating this account for myself right now, I'm just going to take that option and I'm going to put in a password here, and then I will just confirm it as well. And then once I click add, it will go ahead and add that user onto the system. So now their account is active and they'll be able to use that username and password to log into the console. But now that we've looked at how to add a new user, I also wanted to take a look at how to update and customize the roles that you can assign to your users. So if I do scroll down to this user roles section, this is where I can manage the permissions that are associated with each role. There are 3 standard roles that will come with the system. The admin role will have full access to everything in the console by default. That role cannot be edited or deleted just because we want to ensure that there is always someone that does have full access to everything. And then there is also a standard user or dispatcher role, and users assigned to this role by default will have access to all of the activation pages in the console that you have enabled. They might also be able to view the reports as well, but standard users are not going to have access to anything under this configure system section. And then the most limited type of user role is this preset only user. And by default, they are only able to see the preset activation page. Even if you have other activation pages enabled for other users, a preset only user could only see the preset activation page to send out preset alerts that have already been created for them. You could also let them view the reports as well, but again, preset only users by default would have no access to that configure system section. But as you can see, you can also add custom roles as I've done, and then you can also click edit to update the permissions for each role. So I'm just going to edit this preset only role to show you what I have given them access to. So if I scroll into this Alertus console permissions section, this is where you can see what they have access to, and you can update their access as needed just by checking or removing options. But this role can send just preset activations and cancel alerts. They can't send rapid desktop or custom activations since I don't have those checked. And I did give this role access to the alert history reports. Maybe I'll also give them access to, say, the group memberships report as well. I can just check those individually. And I decided not to give them access to any of the dashboards. And then under this configuration section, you can get super specific. So I decided to give this role access just to view the preset alerts page, since that will let them star preset alerts to add to their quick access menu. But this role is not able to add, edit, or delete any of the preset alerts on that page. And then you might also notice at the very top here, you do have the option to assign a different homepage layout to each of your roles, and that just determines what they will see on the homepage when they log in. So I did create a different homepage layout for the preset only role as well. But I'm just going to click save there. And just to give a little more context for the homepage layouts, I am going to go just click back to be taken back to the homepage here. And since I'm logged in as my admin account, that role has the default homepage. But I can show you the one that I created for my preset only role. And you can see they have some different widgets on the homepage. For example, that admin homepage had system resources and server information that a preset only user would not need to see. So you can manage what each homepage layout has as an admin from that manage homepage dropdown. I have that preset only homepage layout selected, so I could come in to update that layout just by checking things that I'd want to be included on the homepage and removing things that I'd like to remove. And you can always click Manage Layouts to create new layouts, and each of those layouts you can assign to one of your user roles. And then going back under Configure System back to that Users and Access Rights page, I did finally want to take a look at the restrictions on this page. So restrictions are optional. You'll set them at the very bottom in this user restrictions section, but these can be used if you do want to further restrict what a specific user can access. For example, my preset only user, I assigned them this building 2 restriction where I have gone in here and created a restriction just to limit which preset alerts that they can see. So for example, if you have a group of users that is only ever working in one building, you might want to create a restriction for them just so that they're able to send only the preset alerts for that building. That can just limit the amount of options that they'll have to pick from to make things more simple if they are activating during an emergency to ensure that they're picking the correct alert. And on this restrictions page, you can also choose to restrict the units or devices, the groups, or the alert profiles and alert services that the user can access. But just to keep things simple, we typically recommend as a best practice that you use this primarily just to restrict the preset alerts that they have available. And just to show you what those updated permissions look like, I am going to log in as this preset only user that, again, is assigned to that preset only role with the building 2 restriction. So I'm just going to open up a new incognito window and I'm going to log back into my same training console, but this time as my preset only user. And once I do log in here, you'll notice they do have a lot more limited options than what my admin user saw. You can see they have that preset only layout here for the home page. And then on the left-hand side navigation bar, they only have access to the preset activation page. They don't see the other activation options. They do see the reports that I selected for them, so they just see the alert history and the related reports and the group memberships report, but they don't see the other ones that I didn't select. They also don't see any of the dashboards since I didn't check those for them on the role page. And then under Configure System, they just have access to that preset alerts page, like I mentioned, so that they can star these preset alerts to add to their quick access menu, but they're not able to actually edit, delete, or create new preset alerts on this page. And as you can see, they don't see all of my preset alerts. They only see the alerts that I selected for them based on that building 2 restriction that I assigned. So customizing roles is a really great way to keep the console simple for people that don't need to have full access to all of the options. And it also makes your system more secure if you're limiting the people that have access to make any configuration changes in the system. But I'm going to close out of this page for now. And then I did also want to touch on another option for adding and managing user accounts if you don't want to have to just create everyone manually in the Alertus console here. You do also have the ability to integrate an Active Directory with your Alertus system, and then the system will be able to pull in users based on the Active Directory information that you have configured. So as it says at the top here, to access those Active Directory settings, you'll access them on the Alertus middleware settings page. And I could click the link to go there directly, or I can also click the middleware button at the bottom left here. And then under configure, I'll click on Alertus middleware settings. And then there is an LDAP and Active Directory option on the contents here. So I can click that just to go directly to those settings. But this is where you can configure the connection between your Alertus system and your Active Directory. You are able to specify the frequency of the sync jobs that are run. So, for example, I have that running every 15 minutes. So, if I did update my Active Directory information within 15 minutes, the Alertus server is going to check and then update my user information based on any changes there. And if I scroll down to this LDAP domain section, this is where you configure the connection to your LDAP domains. You might just have one, but you do have the option to integrate up to 5 different LDAP domains. And if you do make any changes here, you will just want to restart the Alertus Tomcat Windows service so that the changes can take effect. But if I scroll into the LDAP login section here, this is where you can specify where in the Active Directory your system is looking for to pull in the users. So you are able to specify the group name for your admin users, your standard users, and also your preset only users. So as you're managing those groups in your Active Directory, if you're adding new people there, then the Alertus system is able, again, to sync and pull in that user information, and they'll just automatically create a new account for them in the Alertus console. And if you are on the users and access rights page, for any of your users that have been created based on the Active Directory connection, they'll just have an LDAP logo next to their username. All of mine have been manually added, so I can't show that here, but you will be able to see as the user accounts are being created that they're showing up here in your Alertus console. But now that we've taken a look at some ways to add users, I did finally just want to kind of touch on another best practice that can be helpful if you do want to make your Alertus console more intuitive and easy to use for your system admins. As you can see under this configure system section, there are a ton of pages, and you might not be using all of them based on your use case and the specific Alertus products that you all have. So you could potentially create a new user role for your admin users that will still restrict the pages that they have in this configure system section, just so that they're not seeing things that aren't necessarily relevant to them. So just as an example, let's say hypothetically we are an organization that has desktops, alert beacons, and text-to-speech speakers, but we don't have high-powered speaker arrays or HPSAs, and we also don't have Wi-Fi panic buttons, so I really wouldn't have any use for these pages. What I could do was I could add a new role, and maybe I will call it something like University Admin once the page loads. The server hasn't had its coffee yet this morning. Let me click into that one more time. Right, I'm just going to add a role here, and I'm going to name it, let's say, University Admin. And then you could give a description if you'd like. I'll just leave them with the default homepage layout that I use for my other admins. And then here I can just restrict their permissions to get rid of some extra pages that they might not need to use. So let's say in this alert section, I want them to have access to everything here. I do also want them to see all of the reports, except maybe we don't have 911 Connect and maybe we don't have VoIP as well. Maybe I'll just give them access to these reports based on the devices that we actually have. And then in the dashboards, we would use the event dashboard for our desktop panic buttons, but we don't have a use for the HPSA, the iPause, or the Lightning dashboard since we don't use those features. So I'm just going to leave them unchecked. We don't also use the Map Operations Center, so I can leave that unchecked as well. And then under this configuration section, maybe I want to give them access to all of the alert devices, page information. Let's say we don't have an alert display. I don't need to give them that page. I want them to have all of the alert profile information, all of the alert services, contacts, contact methods they'll use, custom event triggers they'll use. We have desktops, so they'll use desktop profiles and policies. They'll use device assignment rules. Maybe we don't have 911 Connect. Maybe we don't have a fire alarm integration, so we won't need that page. But I'll give them access to groups. I'll give them access to edit the homepage layouts. If we don't have HPSA devices, they won't need that HPSA settings page. But I'll let them create new template skins for the desktops. Maybe we don't use iPause, so they don't need those. I'll give them access to locations, media, message templates. We don't have any network audio devices or auth connections, so I won't give them access to those pages. I could also give them access to panic button profiles, desktop forms, preset alerts, preset pins. Essentially, you'll come here, just give them access to the pages that you all use. I'll give them access to settings and middleware. We do have text-to-speech speakers. Maybe we do have USB panic buttons that we use with our desktops. And I'll give them access to users and access rights as well. But again, like I mentioned, let's say we don't have Wi-Fi panic buttons, they probably won't need that page. And I could give them access to the system information as well, but maybe for now I'll just leave that unchecked. And then I'll go ahead and click Add. So that will update their permissions. And it looks like I do already have a role called University Admin that I've created previously. That error was just telling me all of my roles need to have a unique name. So I'm just going to call it University Admin 2 just for this training. And now it will let me add that. So now I have that University Admin 2 role created, and I'm going to assign that role to the new user account that I just created for myself. So instead of the full admin role that has all of the pages, I'm going to give them that university admin role we just created that only has the pages that they'll actually be using. And then I can click Save here to update that account. And then to show you how that changed their access, I again am going to open up a new incognito window and log back into the same training server, but this time as that new account I just created for myself. And then when I log in here, we can take a look at their access. So they have that default homepage here. They have access to all of the activation pages. They just have the event dashboard. Since we don't have HPSAs, they don't need the HPSA dashboard. And then under reports, they just have the reports that they'll use. I didn't give them access to like the VoIP activation reports if we don't have those devices. And then under Configure System, you'll see they just have access here to the pages that I checked for them. So you'll see they don't have that HPSA systems page, for example. They don't have the Wi-Fi panic buttons page since we don't use that. So altogether, this just creates a more simplified experience for your admin users. So you can train them up just on the pages that they'll be using without them getting confused by seeing extra pages that you don't actually use. But I am going to go ahead and close out of this to come back to my main admin account here. And I believe that was everything that I wanted to cover with you all today. So Brooke is going to go ahead and put some links into the chat. We do have a user guide for the users and access rights page that goes through all of the customization settings that we talked through today. So Brooke's putting that in the chat for you all, as well as an article about the Alertus console settings if you want more information about how to update the system-wide settings on the settings page. And then lastly, she is also going to link the registration for next week's Alertus Power Lunch since we have these every Friday. Next week, the Power Lunch is inheriting your Alertus solution, best practices for reviewing, updating, and optimizing your Alertus system. So we'll go through the ways that you can essentially audit a new Alertus system that you've inherited just to take a look at the configuration and identify anything that you might need to update. But with that being said, we will definitely hang on the call for a few minutes longer to answer any questions that come in. I don't see any currently, but feel free to continue putting those into the Q&A box. And I did just see a question come in for adding users. Is there a preset invitation message it sends? I see you can add one, but wasn't sure. And yes, it will. If you do, when you're creating a user, if you check the option when you're adding them to invite a user to create a password via email, then it will send them an email invitation that'll basically just say they've been added to the Alertus console and they'll follow a link to be able to set their password and log in. So that's a good option if you want them to set the password themselves without you having to create it for them. But we'll definitely hang on if there are any other questions coming in. And as always, thank you all for your time today, and I hope that you all have a good Friday and a good weekend.